Thank you, Julie, for the introduction, and thank you all for joining us today to listen us. Today, I will talk about the infrastructural developments and ecological changes in the Euphrates Basin, especially from the late 19th century to the early 20th century. And specifically, I will focus on the Hille and Divania branch of the Euphrates River. And I would like to start my presentation with a quote. And there are no souls that will not burst into tears when they see dried date palms and their blood-shedding spruce in Hille and Divania, where once was a beautiful garden. These were the bitter words of the people of Hille and Divania, who, feeling neglected by the Imperial Center, petitioned for justice in 1904. More than a century previously, Asaf-ud-Dawla, who the famous Indian Nawab of Awadh, had sponsored the construction of the Hindia diversion project to carry water to Najaf in order to show his pious patronage for the sacred pilgrimage center of the Shia world. With the opening of the Hindia Channel, Euphrates slowly shifted from its old route, which was the Hilla branch, towards Hindia. This process led the former channel to drain and be choked by sediments, while the Hindia Channel gradually extended and overflowed. The central government in Istanbul and the local government in Baghdad tried to slow down the overflowing of the Euphrates by opening canals and building embankments on this branch. The second major change in the Euphrates ecology was attempted by Mithat Pasha, the reformist governor of Baghdad in 1870s. With an agenda to drain swamps for the sake of promoting agricultural production and preventing large-scale epidemics frequently occurring in the region, Mithat Pasha dammed the Seklavia Canal to provide water for agricultural lands surrounding Baghdad. And here you can see the Seklavia Canal going to Baghdad. The result of the Pasha's action was that a large volume of water, some 700 cubic meters a second, was added to the already overburdened Hindia Canal and caused immense damage to the country downstream of Fallujah. Thus, the damming of the Seklavia Canal by Mithat Pasha further exacerbated the shifting of Euphrates bed to Hindia. Because of the Euphrates flowing past Hilla lies at a higher level than the Hindia branch, and as it was incapable of carrying the extra supply due to the closing of the Seklavia Canal, the water forced its way down to the lower lying Hindia branch, swept away the old dams, which were built to raise the water level, and so forced it into the Hilla branch, scoured out the bed, and permanently lowered the water level at the point where the two rivers branched off. The Hilla branch immediately began to silt up, and as the Hindia branch provided a straighter and easier course, more and more water continued to pass down it, threatening to leave the former dry and to place out of cultivation the larger area of land dependent on that river for its irrigation. To solve this problem, the Ottoman government in 1890 threw a dam across the river at Hindia, constructed of loose rubble with a 20-meter opening in the middle. As the silting up of the Hilla branch proceeded, more and more water flowed down the Hindia branch, calling for a modification of the dam to meet the altered conditions. Nothing serious was done, and the dam was being gradually swept away until when, in 1908, the Ottoman government invited engineers for the construction of a masonry barrage. In the flood of the 1909, the Hilla branch was passing 30 and 300, and the Hindia branch 2,500 cubic meters per second. All these infrastructural developments couldn't ultimately solve the water distribution problem in the region. Drawing upon Ottoman and British sources, this presentation explores the changing course of the Euphrates and its ecological effects by paying more attention to those at the receiving end of the infrastructure, which means those who are subject to its distribution regimes and marginalizations in everyday life. Benefiting from the interdisciplinary discussions about infrastructure, this presentation questions the modern infrastructural project's promise of modernity, progress, and development to all inhabitants of a region when these projects inaugurated. Alternatively, this study portrays the water infrastructure projects in late Ottoman Iraq as open-ended and contingent processes in which some groups, such as the inhabitants of Hilla and Divania, had to struggle continuously in dealing with the consequences of infrastructure necessary for their survival. And here, like this map was attached to one of the petitions going to the center of the empire. And here you can see the dried region colored by brown. While the complete drying up of the Euphrates Hilla branch in the beginning of the 20th century left 4 districts and 15 sub-districts without water, the inhabitants of Hindia Basin were plagued by repeated floods, which resulted in economic ruin, turned agricultural lands to marshes, and displaced many villages. According to the petitions, the dried Hilla Divania route was 33 hours length, and lands along the coast covered by orchards, which included more than 4,100 date palms. In addition to the significant loss of domestic animals because of scarcity and thirst, people of the region reports that 150 pieces of tax farming lands withered in Hilla, Divania, and Semavi districts. Although the numbers might be exaggerated, one of the petitions from the region states that 100,000 people left their houses behind to find a better sustained place to live in nearby regions. The ones who preferred to stay had to either rely on waters carried by camels with the initiatives of local notables or well waters which were not clean and potable. Through an inspection of the petitions of people of Hilla and Divania, it becomes clear that large water infrastructure projects which aim to turn the region into an agricultural depot wouldn't arouse the same excitement among local people. As opposed to the Ottoman imperial depictions of Mesopotamia, which glorified the region's ancient past and the current infrastructural achievements in the region, inhabitants of Hilla and Divania idealized a more recent past, one not plagued by the processes of groundwater infrastructure investments. The Ottoman central authorities were projecting a glorified region in near future. In contrast to this, petitions from the locals of the region underlined that they couldn't see a future in these lands. Therefore, there was a huge disparity between imperial and local understanding of ecology and infrastructure. Actually, I would like to talk about 3 points that petitioners referred a lot. So first one was about the construction of Hindia Dam. When the early construction of Hindia Dam was completed in 1890, an inscription for the Hindia Barrage was immediately incised on a marble stone and put there by following the Sultan Abdülhamid's order. Petitioners criticized this act of public demonstration by using a satirical language because nothing was completed and the problems were still alive in the region. Second, the petitioners refer to the collapse of the Hindia Barrage in 1904. When it collapsed, petitioners say that the governor in Baghdad and his retinue immediately reached to the region to control the unruly waters of the Euphrates by constructing an embankment made by soil and several bundles of reed and rush. Although there was no trace of water in the Hilla and Divania route, while Hindia route was overflowing after the operation, petitioners blamed local state officials for immediately notifying Istanbul about the success of their operation and given an ostentatious public ceremony to celebrate it. Here we see that the locals of Hilla and Divania see infrastructure as an open-ended process rather than through the teleologies of completion and progress. Their understanding of infrastructure, as opposed to the imperial view, was characterized by the constant presence of ruination and decay. Another point that petitioners make mention of is the significant decrease in the revenues of the Ottoman central government collected from the regions of Hilla and Divania. They asked the government to compare and contrast the previous fiscal records of the region with the current ones to see the huge disparity between them. In other words, they question why the government kept neglecting the significant loss in the state revenues, while it was also damaging the region's economic relations, both with domestic and foreign markets. Petitioners idealized the recent past by making references to the old potential of the region. In this context, old is 10, 20, or 30 years before. When we look at the sayings of Ottoman bureaucrats and intellectuals in Istanbul and Baghdad, we see that they continually emphasize the prospective potential of the region to become an agricultural depot for the empire, either by referring to its once effective irrigation system and agricultural production capacity in the ancient times, which is the far past, or its potential to be a second Egypt, which is its future to be, by referring to the British hydro-engineering policies of like opening the Nile to perennial irrigation. Sorry. Therefore, like from the imperial perspective, the problems that the region was having was temporary. Every infrastructural development was a step further to the realization of the imperial imagination of the Euphrates basin as the future governor of the empire. The imperial perception of time in the Euphrates basin stood in stark contrast to the flow of local geological time and the realities of everyday life in the region. So this was a preliminary research for my dissertation, and I think like here we can see the different meanings of infrastructural development, especially for local and imperial agents, and also I think this presentation helped me to at least see that infrastructure, maybe it was like for the for the state centers or empires, infrastructure projects, they are like, when they are constructed, they are a step further to the completion of to the completion of their ideal, their idealized aims. So here we see that people of Hilla and Divani, they see the infrastructural projects as like open and by progress, but also ruination, decay, and also decay. And the next question that I am planning to ask to further develop my research is that, did these infrastructural works on the Euphrates, while they look being constructed, aim to displace residents of Hilla and Divani in order to redistribute resources to relatively more powerful actors or groups? Because the Ottoman Empire, in the beginning of the second half of the 19th century, starting to collect lands around the Euphrates and Tigris basin. And I would like to see if there was any connection between the Ottoman government's attempt to collect lands in the region to produce cash crops and the distribution of water sources in the region. Thank you for listening.